93% of the ocean around Trinidad and Tobago has never been properly explored, sitting too deep for recreational diving, and until now, too far outside the reach of local science. This week, that changed. A team of Caribbean scientists just completed the first ever locally led deep sea expedition in Trinidad and Tobago's history, sending a robotic vehicle down into total darkness. And what they found down there had never been documented before. At least 20 suspected new species. 3 that might be entirely new genera. A ghostly pale octopus first glimpsed over a decade ago, now finally confirmed. Beds of mussels living off chemicals instead of sunlight. Today, we're taking you down into Trinidad's own backyard, a part of the ocean that belongs to this country and has been sitting completely unexplored the entire time. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Trinidad's own deep sea, explored by Trinidad's own scientists. According to Trinidad and Tobago, Newsday, marine scientists from Trinidad and Tobago recently conducted the first locally led and most comprehensive deep-sea survey of the nation's waters using the remotely operated vehicle Sue Bastion, deployed from the Schmidt Ocean Institute's research vessel, Falkor. The expedition specifically targeted depths beyond the reach of recreational scuba diving, the mesophotic zone between 30 and 199 meters, and the deep ocean beyond that, areas that, according to the expedition's own findings, contain the majority of the 2 islands' largest and least understood ecosystems. Dr. Diva Amon, a Trinidadian marine biologist with Species and co-director of the nonprofit, led the expedition and described its significance directly. As the first locally led deep-sea expedition in Trinidad and Tobago's history, these discoveries are proof that Caribbean scientists can uncover our own deep-sea backyard. That framing matters. Deep-sea research anywhere in the world has historically been dominated by large, well-funded institutions from wealthier nations, meaning the waters directly surrounding a country like Trinidad and Tobago have often been studied, if at all, by outside teams rather than the nation's own scientists. This expedition represents a genuinely significant shift in who gets to explore, document, and claim scientific credit for discoveries made in a country's own territorial waters. The expedition's results were substantial. According to the Schmidt Ocean Institute, researchers documented at least 20 suspected new species during the mission, 3 of which may represent entirely new genera, a taxonomic classification level above species, meaning these organisms could be different enough from anything previously cataloged to require an entirely new branch on the tree of life to properly classify them. Over 700 specimens were collected during the expedition, all of which will be housed at the Zoology Museum at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, in Trinidad and Tobago. In addition, the university describes as increasing the size of the museum's deep sea collection 12-fold in a single expedition. Among the specific discoveries, researchers documented a suspected new species of Grenellidan octopus moving across the seafloor during the dive. According to the Schmidt Ocean Institute, this particular species was first observed during an earlier expedition Dr. Amon participated in back in 2014, but remained unconfirmed and uncollected for over a decade, until this mission finally captured and documented a specimen directly. The team also found an eelpout, a type of deep-sea fish resting on a bed of chemosynthetic mussels, alongside carnivorous sponges, squat lobsters, and additional coral species previously undocumented in Trinidad and Tobago's waters. One detail from this expedition deserves closer explanation because it touches on one of the more genuinely mind-bending concepts in modern biology. According to the Schmidt Ocean Institute, researchers specifically noted that the geological setting of Trinidad and Tobago is ideal for supporting chemosynthetic habitats, ecosystems built around organisms that generate energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight, the process nearly all life on Earth's surface depends on through photosynthesis. Chemosynthetic communities typically form around locations where chemically rich fluids, often methane or hydrogen sulfide, seep up from the seafloor, frequently linked to petroleum geology, exactly the kind of geological setting Trinidad's offshore waters are well known for, given the country's more than century-long history as an oil and gas producer. Bacteria at the base of these food chains convert those chemicals directly into usable energy, supporting entire communities of mussels, worms, and other organisms living in complete darkness, entirely independent of sunlight or the surface world above them. Finding these communities off Trinidad's coast connects the country's deep-sea biology directly to the same underlying petroleum-rich geology that has shaped its economy and landscape for generations, a genuinely elegant link between the nation's energy history and its newly documented natural history. It would be easy to treat a story like this purely as a fun, look-what-they-found moment, but the deeper significance here connects to something we've discussed on this channel before when covering global Seafloor mapping. Roughly 70% of the world's ocean floor remains unmapped in detail, and entire ecosystems can exist for decades or centuries without ever being formally documented by science. Trinidad and Tobago's territorial waters are a small piece of that much larger unexplored puzzle, but this expedition demonstrates something important about how that gap actually gets closed. It doesn't only require large international research budgets and foreign institutions parachuting in to study a country's waters and then publish the findings elsewhere. It can be led directly by scientists from the country whose waters are being explored, using its own university's facilities to house and study what gets found. This also carries genuine practical value beyond scientific curiosity. Understanding what lives in these deep, chemosynthetic, and mesophotic habitats directly informs conservation planning, environmental impact assessments for the offshore oil and gas activity that remains central to Trinidad and Tobago's economy, and broader regional efforts to protect biodiversity across Caribbean waters that, until expeditions like this one, have simply never been comprehensively documented in the first place. The 700-plus specimens collected during the expedition are headed to a permanent home at the University of the West Indies Zoology Museum, where researchers will continue the often lengthy process of formally describing and classifying the suspected new species, a process that, for genuinely novel organisms found at extreme ocean depths, can take scientists months or years of detailed comparative study before a species receives full, formal scientific recognition and a permanent name. The 3 specimens, suspected of representing entirely new genera, will likely require particularly extensive study, given the higher taxonomic bar involved in establishing that something isn't just a new species, but represents a previously undocumented branch of the broader evolutionary tree. Dr. Amon and her species colleagues have framed this expedition explicitly as a starting point rather than a one-time achievement. According to the expedition's own messaging, the goal moving forward centers on building local capacity for continued deep-sea exploration across Trinidad and Tobago's waters, rather than treating this single mission as a complete survey of everything the country's deep sea contains. Given that this expedition alone increased the university's entire deep-sea collection 12-fold, and documented at least 20 new species in a single mission, the clear implication is that Trinidad and Tobago's unexplored deep-sea waters likely hold considerably more still waiting to be found, provided continued expeditions and funding allow local scientists to keep exploring their own backyard. There's something genuinely powerful about a country discovering, for the first time in its own history, exactly what lives in the vast majority of its own ocean territory, a part of the world that had simply been sitting there, unexplored, for as long as Trinidad and Tobago has existed as a nation. 93% of these waters sit below where recreational divers can ever go, meaning an entire hidden ecosystem, new octopus species, chemosynthetic mussel beds, carnivorous sponges, has been quietly living. Complete darkness just off the coast this entire time, waiting for someone to finally look. This expedition didn't just add 20 new species to a global catalog. It proved, in Dr. Amon's own words, that Caribbean scientists can uncover their own deep-sea backyard, using their own resources, for their own museum, on their own terms. That's a genuinely different kind of discovery story than most of what gets covered in ocean science, and it's exactly the kind of story worth telling in full. We'll keep tracking this story and every other major seismic, volcanic, and extreme weather event happening around the world right now. Subscribe if you want to see the next update. Drop a comment and tell me, did you know most of Trinidad and Tobago's own ocean territory had never been explored? See you in the next one.